Donald Trump is set to hold a campaign rally this evening in beautiful Wildwood, New Jersey, but he's going to face some resistance. Congresswoman Mikie Sherrill will lead a New Jersey day of action, including a counter rally with Democratic congressional candidates and union leaders advocating for President Biden's reelection. And Democratic Congresswoman Mikie Sherrill of New Jersey joins us now. She's a Biden-Harris campaign surrogate. Good morning, Congresswoman.
Morning. Great to be here this morning.
So happy to have you. So what do you think about Donald Trump being in your backyard tonight? They're promising tens of thousands on the beach.
On the beach.
On the beach, not much, to put it succinctly. You know, when I heard he was coming to New Jersey, I guess my first thought was, why? My second thought was, well, I guess he's kind of stuck in trial in New York and there aren't many places he can go. But you know, he's not welcome in the Garden State because we know all too well about his failed policies. In fact, many of our problems with Trump here in New Jersey go back long before he ever got into office. He declared bankruptcy 5 times in this state, and each time that is mom and pop stores out of business, contractors not making payroll, workers not getting paid. And so we say in Atlantic City, the House always wins, not when Trump owns it. He actually was able to bankrupt a casino. So we know too well how, you know, his failed policies have hurt our state. And under Joe Biden, we've seen a great deal of success. So under Trump, we lost about 170,000 jobs here. Under Biden, we've gained 464,000. In fact, when I go to places like medical device companies, they're reshoring American manufacturing. Some of my medicine companies are opening new lines of innovation and research because of the policies that Biden has put into place. So it's an exciting time for many of the opportunities here in New Jersey, and we know that going back to the failed policies of Trump will only hurt us.
Congresswoman, I have to give just boffo points for just the brazen political act. I love the counter-programming. And do you think that this is something that we're going to see more of from the Biden campaign, sort of the point-counterpoint from not just the Trump side of the equation, but even stuff that may emanate out of the RNC and other organs of the GOP over the course of this campaign to sort of press the narrative? Simone and I and Alicia were talking about the coalitions that have made up the Biden effort in the past, and how there may be some weaker points in this cycle that need that strengthening. And these types of efforts that you're doing may go a long way to doing just that. What is your thinking there, and how do you see this playing out over the course of the campaign?
Sure. I think what you're going to see from the Biden-Harris team is all of the above. You're going to see a strong ground game, strong work to promote a lot of the work that has been done, a lot of the work that we envision doing as Democrats over the next 4 years. But you're also going to see them taking on Trump toe-to-toe to remind America of, really how much of a failure some of his governing was. So here in New Jersey, it doesn't take much to remember it. He had infrastructure week every week, and yet for some reason could never get shovels in the ground on the Gateway Tunnel project, which Biden did and got to work on almost right away. He's double taxed New Jerseyans with his failed tax policy and says he will double down on that as it's set to expire. We know that in so many ways we've gained jobs. We've had the strongest union president that we've had in decades, maybe in the history of this country. And I think people are reminded of that as we go out and talk about all of the ways New Jersey's has opportunities, has an ability to succeed. And I think what's striking is how few resources the Republicans have right now. I think a lot of the money Trump has raised is going to his legal defense fund. So I don't think you're seeing some of this ground game. I don't think you're seeing some of the work with voters that you're seeing from the Biden-Harris team.
Congressman, you talked about governing, and so I want to talk about some of the governing that we're seeing on Capitol Hill, specifically in the House of Representatives. This from the Washington Post. This title says a lot. As co-rulers of the House, the Democratic majority in waiting may have already arrived. I've asked others if they feel that this is legitimately a coalition government. Do you see opportunities now for Republicans and Democrats to work together?
You know, that was sort of my proposition going into the House of Representatives. I came in the 2018 cycle. With Trump creating chaos everywhere, with Trump not really having a policy agenda other than dismantling decades, if not years, if not centuries of work that we have done to build coalitions across the world to support the economy and the values of the United States of America. As he was working to dismantle that in the House, we were trying to find ways to stop him from doing that. My theory of the case was we would come together as Democrats and Republicans. We would really move forward on bipartisan legislation that made sense for the American people. I have to tell you, it gets harder every year I am in the House of Representatives. And I think what you have seen now is such a failure of the GOP. With this slim majority unable to actually govern at this point because of the MAGA Republicans who, in every sense of the word, don't want to govern, don't have a policy agenda, simply want to create chaos. And I think you saw that every time we come together and start to say, okay, here's the plan. Here's how we're going to deliver together for the American people. Here's how we're going to make Congress work for people. You see someone like Marjorie Taylor Greene inserting herself into that effort, trying to vacate the chair, trying to create more chaos, trying to create more divides, much like President Trump. So I think what we've seen is a consistent desire by Democrats, from President Biden to Hakeem Jeffries down to here in New Jersey, our delegation, working hard to bring people together and continue the governance. Yes, I have been so incredibly impressed with Hakeem Jeffries. Here is somebody who has been so thoughtful, who has come to power in a time of some of, I think, the greatest challenges we've ever faced in the House of Representatives. And he has moved forward, trying to preserve the institution, trying to make sure the House functions and not look at it as we see someone like, again, Donald Trump or Marjorie Taylor Greene, not look at it as how can he win politically, but how can he do his best by the United States of America.
Congresswoman Mikie Sherrill, you have a busy weekend ahead of you. Thank you so much for taking some time to be with us. We've got another hour of the weekend straight ahead. We'll be right back.